All right, sound good?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having this event where you allow us to come up here and just share a little bit of ourselves. I think it's one of the coolest things I've ever done. Me and my girlfriend have been coming here for about a couple of years now, and it's one of the things I enjoy the most. As Bob alluded to, I am one of the migrants. I came here 4 years ago, and today I actually just drove up from Maryville, Missouri, where I live, and I have the fortune or misfortune of managing a fast food restaurant. So when the topic came up of crossing the line, I thought, I encountered so many different variations of crossing the line. For the purpose of tonight's story, I'm just going to share a little bit about when I crossed the line from segregation to integration in South Africa. Like Bob mentioned, I met Hannah a very long time ago, probably the early 90s, and I was a very young boy then. Nelson Mandela got released in 1990, I was 2. In 1994, we had our first democratic election, and I don't really remember much of it at all. And I know I had a lot of transformative and life-changing experiences then, but I was too young to really take it in. There was something known as a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which came on every Sunday. And I remember I'd sit around with my family in the township that I'm from. Township is something like, I guess you guys would consider in a city, but essentially in old South Africa, that's where all the black people would stay. And that's where I grew up, with my grandmother, my grandfather, and what seemed to be just a litany of people all the time. I was just always surrounded by family and just this little cocoon where it was a safe space. And so yeah, we had all these things going on in South Africa that I really didn't take in that much. And I wasn't living with my mother at the time. She was either studying in the early part of my life or she found a job out of state when she didn't actually graduate. But in around about 96 or 97, she decided we'd move to the suburbs to a 13-story apartment block where we were the only black family that resided there. And I had my first taste of what South Africa was actually like. I remember very clearly and vividly one day I came back from school. We stayed very, very nearby to the school that I went to. And my mother worked insane hours, so I would she would be gone by the time I woke up, and I'd be asleep by the time she went back. And one day I came back from school around 5 or 6, I think it was, because I'd always played it, and I wanted to spend as much time as I could there because it was just solitude when I got home. And I came back pretty late. I know they were locking the gates at school, so I had to go home. But on my way, walking back home, I remember feeling like I really, really needed to use the restroom. And my first thought was to find somewhere nearby where I could, but immediately it hit me that if anybody found me here, I'd be in massive amounts of trouble. In this 13-story apartment block that we lived in, I lived on the 7th floor, we did. And it was a very old school style of apartment where, the elevators were like very, very thick doors. And when you got in the elevator, there was actually another gate that you needed to close inside. And you didn't even close it yourself, it was like mechanical, but it took, when you really need to go to the toilet, it feels like an age. And I stepped in there with an older lady, must have been my grand's age. And she pressed the button for the 4th floor. And immediately I thought, this is not gonna end well. And so, but I just thought, you know what, let's just see how it goes. There's no turning back now. We're in this thing, and let's just take it to the top. But when we got to the floor, it got even clearer to me that I wouldn't make it to the 7th. And I just blurted out to this lady, I'm sorry ma'am, would you mind if I came to your apartment? Well, we don't even call it an apartment, we call it a flat. Would you mind if I came to your flat and I used your toilet? What she responded with was not what I was expecting from an elder or somebody that for all my life before I thought was people that you could trust, and somebody that would help you no matter what because they were older than you or they were elderly. I can't really repeat what she said because it was in Afrikaans, which I wasn't fluent in at the time. All I remember was that she called me a kaffer, which is our form of the N-word, and let me know in no uncertain terms that I would never enter her flat. That took me aback a little bit, because it was early in our time we had been living there, and I hadn't really had those kind of interactions with people of another race that had led me to believe that, you know, all these things that had gone on in the country were actually still going on. I mean, I was one of the first generations of people to go to what we called a multiracial school, where blacks and whites would go to school together. And that was the first time I really, really remember being affected by it in that way. So I didn't make it to the top. But I thought maybe that was a one-off, and I thought nothing of it really. I didn't even tell my mom because I didn't want her to freak out, and I never wanted to add any stress to her because I felt like she had a ton of stress as it was. But a couple months later, she sent me to a cafe to get something. I really can't remember what now. What I do remember is that when I got downstairs, there were a group of what must have been 5 or 7 youths, a little bit older than me, that were standing outside of the apartment block. Most places that you'll go to in South Africa, if they're in the suburbs, are very securely built. And so there's like a security gate after the security gate, which you need a remote for, you need to call somebody to get in or out. And I think I needed to get something from my mom's car. But the next thing I remember, the kids that were standing outside, just sitting around on the grass and just relaxing, they had opened the gate, so I knew one of them lived there. And I was pinned up against the garage of one of the lower floor, at the lower level, and I had 3 dogs barking furiously in my face, and these kids yelling about me being a Catholic. And I just kind of thought, man, this is not what I thought crossing the line would be like. But I learned a lot from those experiences, and in between all those experiences, I met Hannah, people like Hannah and Bob, which led me to crossing the lines over here. So even though that was a really, really negative and bad experience, I'm thankful for it because it taught me a lot. And meeting people like Bob and Hannah even taught me more, that I couldn't and I wouldn't judge a bunch of people just based on these losers that I met. And that's how I crossed the line.